The Dingo Fence is one of the longest man-made structures on Earth, and it's been a kind of natural experiment for decades. Now, a new section of the fence is being built, which will take 5 years and cost about $25 million. Back in 2015, people joked that Australia had built thousands of kilometers of fencing in the middle of nowhere just to stay busy. Some even called it an obsession, especially because of certain strange gates like the Worry Gate, which seemed like examples of over-the-top bureaucracy. But 10 years later, the situation has changed, and no one is laughing anymore. These fences now play a serious role in controlling which animals can survive, which farms can keep running, and even in solving crimes. The real story behind these fences is more surprising than most people imagine. It all started with a small decision on Christmas Day in 1859. Thomas Austin, a landowner in Victoria, opened a wooden cage and released 24 European rabbits into the wild. He thought it would be fun, a bit of sport for him and his guests. They planned to hunt them later. But what seemed like a harmless idea turned into a disaster for the entire continent. Within 20 years, those rabbits had spread across huge parts of Australia. They weren't just eating grass, they were destroying entire paddocks, ruining crops, and hurting wool production. Farmers began to complain that rabbits were taking over their land. By the late 1940s, surveys and reports showed that over 600 million rabbits were roaming the country. It was the biggest outbreak of a land mammal ever recorded. People started calling it the Grey Plague. What began as a joke had now turned into a serious national crisis. In response, Western Australia chose to fight the problem with physical force, by building fences. During the Great Depression, hunting rabbits became a common way for people to get food. Then in 1897, engineers began planning a huge fence through the harsh cliffs near Zootorf. After more than 10 years, they finished building what would be the longest fence in the world. Over 2,223 miles of strong, tightly woven metal mesh, buried deep to stop rabbits from digging under it. People called it the rabbit-proof fence. Building a fence that could stop rabbits was no small task. They had to dig into the ground to make sure rabbits couldn't easily burrow under it. Camels were used to carry the workers who maintained the fence, even in temperatures that soared above 45 degrees Celsius. These workers, known as boundary riders, walked up to 30 kilometers a day, carrying tools to patch holes in the fence by hand. But no fence is perfect. Rabbits still managed to get through. It wasn't until scientists got involved that Australia began to gain the upper hand. In 1950, researchers released a virus called myxomatosis, which spread quickly among the rabbits. Within just 2 seasons, the population dropped by more than 90%. But nature adapts. Some rabbits developed resistance, and their numbers slowly began to rise again. So in 1995, Australia released another virus, called the K5 strain of rabbit hemorrhagic disease, originally from Korea. This virus only affects rabbits and is spread by insects or contact between rabbits. In dry areas, it killed 9 out of every 10 rabbits. These viruses didn't completely fix the problem, but they helped keep rabbit numbers low. That meant the fences could now be used more as a backup system instead of the main defense. Meanwhile, economists started looking at the financial impact. In 2023, a study showed that the fences had saved around $5 billion in damage that would have been done to farms and wool production. That's 10 times more than what had been spent to build and maintain them. With numbers like that, even critics began to understand why the fences mattered. But the story isn't just about economics. The fence also had a deep impact on Aboriginal communities. It cut across the traditional lands of the Nyangumata and Wongatha people, breaking ancient songlines and blocking access to water routes that had been used for generations. In some areas, Indigenous families told stories about reaching the fence and being forced to lift their children and animals over it, just so they could keep following their seasonal paths. So while the fence helped save farms and protect the land from invasive rabbits, it also created new problems. It became a symbol of both survival and separation, an incredible engineering feat, but one with a complicated legacy. Modern satellite studies have revealed that the Dingo Fence has done more than just change animal movement. It has actually altered the land and even the sky. Because the fence affects where vegetation grows and how the land holds heat, it may have even shifted local rainfall patterns. These findings helped Australia learn two difficult lessons. First, no matter how fast humans build, invasive species usually move faster. By the time the final section of the rabbit-proof fence was built, rabbits had already spread far beyond it. Second, once fences become part of the economy, they're nearly impossible to remove. Without them, the next drought, disease, or pest outbreak could be a disaster. So, after the rabbit population was finally brought under control, attention turned to another problem: dingoes. If a fence could slow the rabbits, could it also stop Australia's top predator? The conflict with dingoes didn't start out in the wilderness. It began in the economy. In the early 1900s, wool prices began to fall, and farmers sent urgent telegrams explaining the problem. Many said their sheep were being attacked by dingoes, leading to massive losses. Farmers described finding dozens of lambs dead in one morning, all killed by just one dingo. By springtime each year, over 10% of sheep were either missing or had been torn apart. Political cartoonists made jokes about dingoes acting like tax collectors, but for graziers, the situation was anything but funny. In 1914, the response was clear: build another fence. Surveyor Jack J. Moore was told to start heading southwest and keep building, no matter what. His teams worked through rivers, rocky hills, and intense summer heat, often over 40 degrees Celsius. They boiled tea in old grease tins, slept next to burning hot coils of wire, and earned very little money. Most workers didn't even make it to lunchtime. But the ones who stayed managed to complete a nearly impossible task. They dragged heavy wire over rough land, stacked logs across flood zones, and eventually finished what would become one of the world's biggest construction projects. By 1958, the Dingo Fence was complete. It stretched 5,614 kilometers, still the longest fence on Earth. If you uncoiled it, it could wrap around Spain twice. And it wasn't just long. It was tough. It stood 1.8 meters tall, had barbed wire at both the top and bottom, and included a section buried 30 centimeters deep to stop dingoes from digging underneath. The land on both sides was cleared 5 meters wide, leaving no place for a predator to hide. The fence's main job was to keep dingoes out of New South Wales and protect sheep farms from deadly attacks. Over time, the original wooden fence posts were replaced with stronger, recycled plastic that could withstand termites and weather. But keeping the fence in good shape takes constant work. Across 3 Australian states, 23 officers, known as doggers, patrol the fence. Each one is responsible for about 300 kilometers. Their vehicles carry spare pickets, mesh, tools, and tires. They inspect their sections twice a week, and if anything breaks, special sensors send alerts back to headquarters in Broken Hill. These patrols are not just for practice. In June 2024, a pack of dingoes got through a break in the fence at the border of Queensland and New South Wales. By morning, 34 sheep were dead and dozens more were injured. That single attack wiped out half of one family's yearly income. That's why, even though some farmers complain about the small maintenance fee, just over 10 cents per sheep, they still pay it, because the cost of a single break is far worse. The fence takes about $10 million a year to maintain. That money comes from a mix of state funding and graziers' contributions. The return on that investment comes in the form of fewer sheep lost and higher profits. But it's not just money keeping the fence in place, it's also the law. Leaving a gate open could get you 3 months in jail. Cutting the wire could mean 6 months. Even with its success, the fence comes at a serious ecological cost. What happens when you permanently remove a top predator like the dingo from a massive ecosystem? To understand the impact, all you have to do is stand at the dingo fence and look both ways. Step just 100 meters to the east, and the land looks dry, pale, and lifeless. But walk through the gate and go west, and suddenly the desert is greener, fuller, and more vibrant. The difference is so dramatic that it can be seen from space. This isn't just a visual trick. Over 32 years of satellite data collected by the University of New South Wales has shown that the presence or absence of dingoes affects how the land, breathes. Using vegetation models, researchers found that removing the top predator didn't just change animal populations, it affected the entire ecosystem. With dingoes gone, smaller predators like foxes and feral cats multiplied, putting more pressure on native wildlife. Grazing animals like kangaroos also increased, stripping away more vegetation. In other words, by trying to protect sheep, humans accidentally unbalanced everything else. The Dingo Fence is a powerful reminder that when we try to control nature, nature pushes back in unexpected ways. On the west side of the fence, where dingoes still roam freely, the land recovers quickly after rain. Green plants grow back fast, and the soil remains healthier. But on the eastern side of the fence, where dingoes have been removed, the land keeps getting worse. Every time the weather turns dry, the ground becomes patchy, brown, and lifeless. This major difference is mostly caused by pressure, especially from grazing animals. Dingoes help control that pressure by keeping grazers like kangaroos moving. Without dingoes, the animals settle in one place for too long and eat the plants down to almost nothing. Red kangaroo numbers have exploded on the eastern side. Since no predators scare them off, they stay in one area, eat plants down to the roots, and trample the soil into dust. Then, when a cold front blows through, it lifts that loose dust into the air. These rust-colored dust storms can travel up to 600 kilometers, even turning Sydney sunsets orange. They also trigger asthma problems, sending more people to hospitals. Doctors have even started using AI to help create personal treatment plans for asthma patients because of the rising cases. But the damage goes far beyond just dust and grass. The entire food chain is affected. Dingoes used to keep red fox numbers under control. Without dingoes, fox populations have grown up to 5 times larger in fenced areas. Foxes are very skilled hunters. Research shows that one fox can destroy all the eggs in a bird's nest in a single night. Because of this, species like quails, masked lapwings, and even some rare lizards have started disappearing. Bird songs that once filled the desert now no longer echo across many parts of the eastern zones. The rise in kangaroo numbers has caused another serious problem: disease. In 2024, veterinarians studied kangaroos near Camowheel and discovered that nearly 1 in 3 carried antibodies for the Wall virus, a disease linked to the 1990s blind kangaroo outbreak. That infection rate is almost 3 times higher than what's found in kangaroos living west of the fence, where dingoes still keep numbers in check. It's a clear example of how overcrowding leads to disease. Even the desert landscape itself has changed. Drone scans over deserts like the Simpson and Strzaletsky have shown that dunes on the dingo side are taller, up to 3 meters higher. This is because shrubs, untouched by grazing animals, help keep the sand in place. On the eastern side, where kangaroos eat these shrubs, the dunes collapse, releasing clouds of fine iron-rich dust into the air. That dust has traveled across the Tasman Sea, and scientists believe it helps start plankton blooms in the Southern Ocean. These blooms feed fish like hoki in New Zealand, and eventually even show up in processed food like fish fingers sold in faraway places such as Lagos. Below the surface, the damage goes deeper. Overgrazing removes leaves from the ground, starves underground fungal networks, and depletes nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen. But in areas where dingoes still hunt, the soil has more carbon, stronger fungi, and better conditions for trees like mulga and acacia to grow. Without predators, that balance disappears, and tree cover begins to fade, a quiet change with serious effects on the carbon cycle. All of this shows how a single 1.8-meter tall wire fence has changed an entire ecosystem. In New South Wales, dingoes have been mostly gone for more than 80 years. But their absence has reshaped everything, from plant growth to virus outbreaks, from desert winds to global seafood chains. While nature struggles to adapt, the fence itself has also started to show signs of wear and tear. When seen from the air, the dingo fence might look like just a line in the dirt. But up close, it's constantly under attack, not just from animals, but from nature itself. Every day, it battles sunlight, freezing nights, and armies of insects. During the day, the sun's UV rays slowly break down the protective zinc coating on the wire. At night, Cold air forces dew into tiny cracks, which causes more damage. Termites climb the fence posts, dig into wire knots, and release acids that corrode the metal from the inside. In early 2024, inspectors walked along the fence and reported that about 1,000 kilometers were seriously damaged. The government realized that if nothing was done, large sections of the fence would fail within 5 years. That triggered action. New South Wales and South Australia agreed to fund major repairs. One of the biggest rebuild projects, stretching from the Sturzeletsky Track to the Murray River, now has a budget of around 27 million Australian dollars. Workers are replacing old wooden posts with recycled plastic ones that termites can't eat and that won't rot. In remote places where trucks can't go, helicopters carry in high-strength mesh. New solar-powered smart gates now open and close automatically, helping to prevent human mistakes. Engineers are also testing high-tech mesh with conductive ink inside glass fibers. If the wire breaks, the connection fails and a control center in Broken Hill gets an instant alert. People like pastoralist James Morgan, who owns 5 million acres on both sides of the fence, are excited for the improvements. Farmers have also started using solar-powered motion lights and sirens to scare off dogs at known crossing points. But even with all this technology, nothing beats the power of weather. In the outback, just 1 hour of rain can cause flash floods. In January 2023, one of these floods tore open a 32-kilometer gap in the fence near the South Australia, New South Wales border. Contractors were busy protecting towns, so local graziers had to make emergency fixes using whatever they had: cable ties, scrap mesh, and determination. Sheep prices dropped, and one landowner gave up and put his station up for sale. He couldn't afford to wait for the next repair season. His property had become too vulnerable, and the wild dogs were already moving in. After floods, another threat arrives: feral camels. There are around 500,000 of them, and during droughts they head south in search of water. A single large camel can crush 20 fence posts in one night. These days, morning patrols often start with drones. Using infrared cameras, they scan the fence for damage before sunrise. Some property owners have buried sensors in the wire that detect strong vibrations. If something hits the fence, a modem at their homestead sends out an alert. Others rely on solar-powered lights that flash at night, hoping to scare thirsty camels away. Even with all this technology, the fence still depends on people. Across New South Wales and South Australia, 23 men known as Dingoes maintain the fence in rotating shifts, 3 weeks on, 1 week off. Each one carries 14 spare posts, 50 kilos of mesh, repair tools, and a cooler filled with frozen oranges, the only fruit that lasts without a fridge. At night, they camp by the fence, listening to old radios and staying alert in the silence of the bush. One dogger told Australian Geographic that the hardest part of the job is the loneliness. But regular check-ins via satellite and breaks on the coast help keep their spirits up. Hidden about 50 kilometers east of Broken Hill is a section of the fence most people don't know about: a double-gated compound protecting a research site for advanced scientific studies. Inside, under tall eucalyptus trees, lie over 70 human bodies donated to science. Back in the 1980s, Botswana built a double-layered veterinary fence across the desert. The main goal was to protect its beef exports by preventing the spread of foot and mouth disease. At first, this seemed like a good solution. But then, in 1983, a major drought hit. Watering holes dried up, and around 250,000 blue wildebeest tried to migrate to the Okavango Delta, something they had done for generations to find food and water. But this time, they couldn't get through. The fence blocked their path. As they gathered in huge numbers, unable to move forward, many began to die. Trapped by the fence, they couldn't reach the resources they needed to survive. The desert offered no mercy, and the dry conditions made things worse. Eventually, tens of thousands of wildebeest died near the fence line. This tragedy didn't just affect the animals. The sudden loss of such a massive number of wildebeest also had a chain reaction across the ecosystem. Predators lost a key food source, the land saw changes in plant growth, and the natural balance that had existed for thousands of years was disrupted. This situation is a powerful reminder that fences, while helpful in some ways, can also create serious problems when they interfere with nature's cycles. Just like the Dingo Fence in Australia, which changed landscapes, animal populations, and even weather patterns, Botswana's veterinary fence reshaped the land in unexpected and painful ways. Now, people around the world are rethinking how and why fences are used. The lesson is clear. While fences can solve some issues, they also come with consequences. Whether it's in Africa, Australia, or elsewhere, managing wildlife and the environment takes more than just building walls. It takes understanding, planning, and the willingness to change when nature pushes back. They piled up against the wire and died where they stood. What followed was one of the worst wildlife disasters ever recorded. Scientists called it the Fence of Death. Within a decade, wildebeest populations dropped by over 90%. Biologists still describe it as the fastest collapse of a large mammal migration in human history. And yet, the fence still stands. Why? Because like Australia's dog fence, once a line protects trade, taking it down feels riskier than keeping it up. In Botswana, it was beef exports. In Australia, it's wool. In Europe, it was pork. And the logic repeats itself. In North America, it's no different. In 2022, researchers used airborne LiDAR to scan the sagebrush steppe across Alberta and Montana. What they found was staggering. Over half a kilometer of fence in every square kilometer of prairie. 6 wires for every gravel road. GPS collars on pronghorn antelope showed each animal runs into fences more than 220 times a year. Migration routes that once stretched straight for hundreds of kilometers now zigzag endlessly, as animals search for any spot low enough to crawl under. And yet, the study found no federal or provincial plans to remove any of it. Rusted wire is easier to ignore than to dismantle. The same playbook played out in Europe when African swine fever began to spread in 2015. Denmark rushed to build a 5-foot-high, boar-proof fence along 70 kilometers of its border with Germany, completed in under a year. Slovenia, Croatia, and Hungary did the same. The virus kept moving. But the fences stayed. Snagging red deer antlers. Trapping endangered lynx. Conservationists now call them ghost walls. And still, in 2024, Norway announced plans to fence its entire border with Sweden to stop wild boar. The cost. The ecological damage? Not yet calculated. It's always react first, ask questions later. Sound familiar? Even history throws up red flags. In China, scientists studying the Great Wall's impact on plants found something eerie. Shrubs on either side, cut off for centuries, became genetically inbred, split not just by stone, but by time. Just 600 years of separation changed their DNA. Today's steel fences could do the same in just a few decades. Every one of these stories echoes the same pattern. Fences go up to protect products, beef, pork, wool, before scientists can weigh in. Most countries don't even know how many fences they have. And once a fence gets written into trade deals, insurance rates, or land values, it becomes harder to tear down than to just patch it up. Even Australia's own fence boards face this same choice every year. And so far, the wire always wins. But maybe it doesn't have to. Australia, the nation that built the longest pest fence on Earth, now has a chance to lead. If it can shift, modernize, or digitize even part of its 5,600 kilometers dog fence, it could show the rest of the world a better way. A way that protects livelihoods and landscapes. That uses smart tech instead of brute force. That stops and thinks before building the next fence. Thanks for watching. See you in our next story.